Our favourite time of the week to talk to our favourite person in the world, the wonderful Megyn Kelly, exclusive to Paul Murray Live, and she's back from the Bahamas, baby.
It was amazing. Highly recommend.
Well, you look $1,000,000 as you always do. Now, let's not quite go to politics right off the bat. Instead, I want to go to one of your favourite people and mine, George Clooney. Now, this bloke is so far up his own backside, it isn't funny. And he, I think, wrote and directed a film a long time ago about a legendary American journalist, Edward R. Murrow. He's now turned it into a play. He's performing in the play. And is it true that at the end of the play, he turns around and just starts lecturing the audience?
Yes, he's got a lecture for the press in this very difficult era. You know, you might say democracy dies in darkness is the thrust of his message, but how the media really needs to step up and not abandon its core ideals now more than ever. And he thinks he's in a position to lecture us, yes, because he played a journalist on TV or on the big screen in a very silly movie called One Fine Day, where he was across from Michelle Pfeiffer. She was really more the star, and he played a reporter for the New York Daily News. That was 30 years ago. I guess he thinks it makes him into an actual journalist or, you know, editor of a newsroom, which he's not. And He goes on 60 Minutes to promote this thing, and they ask him about his Truth to Power op-ed that he did in the New York Times when Biden was dangling by a thread and George Clooney stepped in to cut it. And this is presented to us now as an exercise in true courage, true truth-telling. And really, it took a lot, you know? They got into, like, what made him do it? Like, how did he have it in him to write that op-ed? And the answer was, well, I was raised to value the truth. I was raised to tell the truth, not lies. There are a lot of people in my party who are telling lies.
Happy you did it?
Yeah. I'll make it kind of easy. I was raised to tell the truth. I had seen the president up close for this fundraiser, and I was surprised. And so I feel as if there was a lot of profiles in cowardice in my party through all of that. And I was not proud of that. And I also believed I had to tell the truth.
Now, to say this is revisionist history would miss the entire plot, Paul. He had that fundraiser for Joe Biden on June 15th of 2024, where Joe Biden could barely stand up on the stage. Obama had to rescue him, physically rescue him. We reported on it. We talked about it in this show. Everybody was talking about it who wasn't owned by the Dems, and called purveyors of misinformation. This is why we were accused of deep fakes, cheap fakes by the administration, a line parroted around the media cycles. George Clooney said nothing. Did he come out and say, no, all those reporters and those media folks who are saying, look, he looks like he's really having some infirmity problems are onto something? I've got to be honest. You know, what I saw dovetails with that perfectly, and we need to talk about it. Did he anonymously go to some reporter to say, please print the real story about what happened at that fundraiser? No, he did none of that. What actually happened was June 27th came and they had the presidential debate in which Biden self-immolated and ruined any future chances of remaining the nominee, which I said that night, as you may remember. It was very obvious that he could not go forward. And yet Biden hung on because he just was stubborn. He would not leave. The whole party was in meltdown. The polls came in showing he couldn't win. There was no chance he could win, and that Kamala wouldn't win either. That's what the Democrats were looking at. And it was only at that point that George Clooney, midway into July now, a full month after he had hosted that fundraiser, wrote the op-ed, because at that point he realized the Democrats' chances depended on it. And now, with the help of CBS News and 60 Minutes, it's all rewritten and gift-wrapped into, I was raised to tell the truth. And we need more courageous people like me in my party and in the media. Thank you. And you know, sold, right? The bill of goods sold.
Yeah, and what I find incredible is that these are the people who refuse to learn any lesson out of the last election. Remember, we spoke at the time about how the media was so far away from where the average American, and I would suggest Australian, is, yet they keep going on, and they basically pick up where they left off. They never admit a mistake, and I hate when you read a book or you see a story and nobody admits they've ever done anything wrong. Are they surprised at all that their numbers are down, people aren't paying attention, and the president couldn't give two stuffs what they say?
Mm-hmm. You're so right. And there's no better example of that than the New York Times trying to do a COVID retrospective last week. Like, what happened during COVID? And you would think that the line would be, we misled you and we're sorry. But instead it was, we were misled about COVID. Like, they're also part of the victim pool. Like, they asked tough questions and they just got misled, and they're really sad and mad about it, like the rest of us. They lied to us at every turn. Their lead reporter, this Apurva Mandavelli, was the one saying, you're racist if you say that COVID started in a lab. And this piece actually ponders, why weren't we allowed to have a full-throated discussion about whether COVID came from a lab? The same paper. Because your lead COVID reporter was telling everyone that was racist. What are you saying? How dare you print this without doing a little bit of navel gazing? Like, what might I have done? Did I have something to do with it? It was absolutely stunning. And then today they drop another piece on their popular podcast called The Daily, where they just can't believe that Trump has, quote, created, which he did not create, an entire ecosystem of media that's supporting him and that won't challenge him, meaning digital media, podcasts, and so on. Meanwhile, okay, A, that's not true for Trump. There are plenty of people like me who will challenge President Trump, and he doesn't much like it, but that's the way it goes. And I'm not the only one. But secondly, B, the New York Times, of all people, to say that you've been running cover for Democrats for decades. You failed to snuff out the infirmity problem or the fact that the neurologist visited the White House more than a dozen times in the last year of Biden's presidency. And now you're like, what must it be like to have a whole ecosystem of media there just to run cover for you? A false charge for Trump, but a very real one for the New York Times and Democrats.
Now to the obsession of the day, a Signal conversation, which is like WhatsApp, which is an encrypted messaging app where a whole collection of people in the national security area were having a conversation about an attack on the Yemeni rebels, and there was a journalist who got invited into the conversation.
The only real scandal is that somebody added the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic to their Signal conversation. I mean, it's an encrypted app. It's not the best place, I gather, to be having, discussions about war, possible war against the Houthis. I think everyone in the Trump administration would admit that. But was that really the big sin, or was it the fact that they actually managed to somehow CC The Atlantic's editor-in-chief, who made a big story out of it? I mean, it was dumb. I think they'll do it differently now. Nothing happened. Like, they didn't CC Iran. They didn't loop in the Ayatollah and endanger the men. Yeah, it could have happened. It didn't. A lot of things could happen. But the question is, did they? Our men executed the mission perfectly. The Houthis took a lot of damage. We sent our message loud and clear. We took out Houthi leadership. This is something the Biden administration was too scared to do for 4 years. Trump did it within his first 2 months, and the mission was a massive success. If I were the Democrats, I'd not really want to be calling attention to this particular exercise because it was so good. But they found a process problem leading up to it in which really sound, sage, smart discussions were being had by Hegseth, by J.D. Vance, the vice president, by Mike Walls, the national security advisor, who's the one who inadvertently added the Atlantic editor-in-chief to the discussion about, do we do this? Is it more in our interest, or is it more in Europe's interest? Should we make Europe take the lead because they use these waterways 40% more than we do? We're only at 3%. All good discussions to be having. And then they showed unity and said, let's do this. None of that should have happened in the ear of Jeffrey Goldberg. Shouldn't have happened on Signal either. Okay, both of those will be rectified. No one got hurt. Let's move on, because the same media that wants to pretend they're so outraged about the fact that classified information was provided and discussed on this encrypted app. They leak classified information to the media every day. They did this every day of the Trump administration. This is what the CIA was doing. This is one of the reasons why Trump distrusts the national security apparatus, and so do most Republicans, because it was used against him for 4 solid years. Not to mention, they didn't care when the old defense secretary went AWOL for 10 days because he was having some sort of a surgery that he didn't want to tell us about because it involved man parts. Okay, sorry, but that's not allowed. You're the Secretary of Defense. They didn't care when Joe Biden got 13 service personnel killed, the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal. They didn't care about any of these military scandals. So please spare me that they somehow care about this one.
Bloody oath. And one last one here is, I want to go through, yet again, a revelation to the left that young men are growing more conservative. It doesn't surprise me, it doesn't surprise you, but I love that it surprises the left that there is only so far you can push these blokes before eventually they give you the proverbial middle finger.
They're too late. In the news today is a story about how now certain governors, the governor of Maryland, who's a favorite on the Dem side to possibly be a possible nominee in 28. The governor of Connecticut, who won't be. The governor of Michigan, Gretchen Whitmer, who is also on the short list. They're starting these initiatives to help young men, like just sort of prioritize young men. That's not it. First of all, the guy in Maryland, it's all about like city kids. Okay, well, that's a different problem. Like kids who grow up in the hood, who don't have opportunity. That's not about the young men. That's about growing up poor with no advantages, surrounded by crime, which is a different problem that needs to be solved. They don't know what they're doing. They don't understand why they've lost them, Paul. They don't understand that it's everything they've made their party about. Like you have to redo everything. The guy in Connecticut, Ned Lamont, was like, I'm expanding DEI to include young men. I think that's something everyone can get behind. Wrong, sir. Wrong. DEI is how you lost them. The young men hate DEI. They are sick and tired of showing up at school assemblies that are Black History Month, Gay Pride Month, Women's History Month, Indigenous Peoples Month. They're sick of this shit. They are over identity politics in every way. They are sick and tired of not getting jobs when they graduate from good colleges. They're sick and tired of getting perfect 4.0s and perfect SAT scores and not getting into top tier schools because they happen to have white skin and be boys. They are sick and tired of being a man, taking risks, being masculine, having testosterone flow through your veins and not be ashamed of it, be shamed, be demonized, be castigated by a turn of the nose or a casual reference, or absolutely no empathy for the problem of male depression or male suicide. Or when someone dares speak out about it, like a Jordan Peterson, they get mocked as, you just lead a bunch of incels, like those loser men who can't get some. Well, you're not going to get some unless you respect women. Let me do what I want while I spend your money unapologetically. All that, like this is the new version of female empowerment. They don't understand why they're loathed, their weakness. It's pathetic. It's ugly. It's a turnoff. They're having DEI for white men, whatever that means, Ned, ain't it. And they're not going to get it until they get a real man with actual testosterone in his veins who would never be caught dead in a man bun carrying a Merce to lead their party back into full masculinity. Only then will these young men even give them a second look.
Thank you, Rockstar. See you next week.
The pleasure's mine. See you next week.